Is your AC unit just blowing warm air, or has it stopped working completely? Call Phil Thomas AC at 954-434-4576. In business in South Florida, 50 years. Family owned and operated. Phil Thomas AC will never sell you an AC unit that you don't need. That's Phil Thomas AC, 954-434-4576.
I'll never forget that moment.
As long as I live.
It was a moment.
It was a moment that changed my life.
We looked down from the chopper and saw the whole area was flooded.
At that moment, it really hit me. This is why I joined the Guard.
People had gone up to the rooftops to escape the rising waters.
Talk about intense moments. We had to lower the guys on line some 30 feet down.
This is where teamwork and training really paid off.
It took steady nerves and steady hands for the chopper pilots to hover like that.
No question, Guard pilots are the best in the world.
I couldn't believe it. I just saved a life.
What could be better than serving the people of my hometown?
In the National Guard, you serve your community as well as your country while you work or attend college. In return, you gain skills in which you can build a career and receive benefits that can help you pay for college. Learn more about what it means to be a citizen soldier at NationalGuard.com.
Sponsored by the Florida National Guard. Aired by the Florida Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Talk 1470, WWNN, Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
AM 1470, WNN, with more of what you need to know. Here are the latest from Invite Health with Jerry Hickey, weekdays at 9 on AM 1470, WNN. Talk 1470 WNN is now available on iHeartRadio. Download it now for free on your app store and take WNN with you wherever you go with iHeartRadio.
Talk health. Talk wealth. Talk politics. Talk 1470 WNN.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is CareGiverSolutions.info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on CareGiverSolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Well, welcome everybody to CareGiverSolutions.info. My name is Marcia Teele, and I'll be your host today. I'm so excited to launch this new show. We have lots and lots of great information. You're going to be very excited, as I am, with everything that we have going on. And my first thing I want to tell you is that CareGiverSolutions.info was actually created for you, the caregiver, to provide good, free, educational information from professionals in the healthcare field that's going to help you solve your caregiving problems. And that's the whole crux of this show, because I'll tell you what, caregiving is hard. And caregiving is something you probably never thought you'd end up doing for whatever reason. And so no one goes to school to learn how to be a caregiver. It's very difficult to sort through all the information out there. And so CareGiverSolutions.info is going to be your solution to help you with all those problems. So welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're tuning in. For those listening, driving to your home, thank you for tuning in to us. And for all of you watching us on CareGiverSolutions.info, we're glad to have you with us today. So I want to tell you what you're going to be learning, who you're going to see on this show going forward. we are going to be inviting awesome professionals, experts in their field. They're going to tell you and share with you their expertise to help you with all kinds of topics. For instance, we will have physicians, neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, right? We're going to have health professionals in home health companies to walk you through what you do when you might need that. We're going to have nurses. We're going to have hospice information. We're going to have assisted living information. We're going to have people that can tell you what to expect if you have to deal with a nursing home. So there's so much out there, and it's so confusing. And so this is what the show is for, to cut through that, give you the right information, and help you. And so I'm so excited that we're going to be doing that today. This program can be heard on the radio at WNN 1470 AM, anywhere from just south of Orlando to just north of Miami and all the way west to Belle Glade. So if you know someone in that area, give them a call, tell them to tune in. We're going to be giving this information out on the radio, and anybody in the whole world can watch us on the web at caregiversolutions.info. Now, in addition to all of those experts that are be coming onto this show, we're going to be doing other things that for you, the caregiver, you'll be involved. You can get your exact questions answered. You might have something that's very unique to your situation. And if you do, you'll be able to either call in and ask that, or you'll be able to go onto our website and ask us a question, and then we'll put it on the show or answer your questions in any way that is convenient for you. For instance, we're going to have caregiver tips. Little things. Sometimes it's just the little thing that can make all the difference in the world with how you do something. And sometimes it's like, that aha moment. It's amazing that because caregivers can be so overwhelmed, so much into the caregiving role, they don't even have a chance to stop and think about, how else could I do this? What else could I use? What would be better? Who could I call? So we're going to be giving caregiver tips to you. We're also going to be giving caregiver giveaways, things that are going to help you. Some books, some information, some giveaways as far as charts and brochures and things that are free to you that we can mail directly to your home. And in your comfort of your own home, you'll be able to read this information at your leisure and absorb it, because it really is a lot to absorb when you're being a caregiver. And hopefully you'll find the time as a caregiver to take a little bit of time for yourself and read and learn, because that's what a good caregiver needs, is education, because education and knowledge will help you be a much, much better caregiver and will help you to de-stress as well. We're also going to bring you some live stories. We have stories from actual caregivers. We have stories from doctors. And these are things that I find very interesting because they are real. But you don't maybe have a chance to learn from other people that way if you're not in a support group and you hear other people's stories. So we'll be bringing live stories to you, real stories from real people that you could probably relate to. Also, we'll be giving support group information if you're interested in that. Lots and lots of dementia help. I personally have a passion for Alzheimer's and dementia as far as working with caregivers, and I have loved old people and babies ever since I was a little girl, and so it's the perfect thing for me to be passionate about. And so I'm going to be sharing all kinds of information for you as we go through week after week, every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. I want to thank, first of all, our national sponsor, Arden Court's Memory Care Communities. They are one of the best, in my opinion, memory care communities, and they're all across the United States. So as a national company, they really support what we do here in South Florida, and we have an 800 number that we're going to be sharing with you so that you can find an Arden Courts anywhere in your area. So I want to thank Arden Courts for bringing this program to us as our first national sponsor. Arden Courts is very unique because with that 800 number, they actually answer it themselves, a real live person in the United States. It's not a call center. It doesn't go overseas someplace. Right here in the United States, this phone number is actually answered 365 days a year, from 9 a.m. in the morning to 11 p.m. at night, including weekends, including holidays. Because guess what? Caregiving doesn't stop on weekends. Caregiving doesn't stop at night. And caregiving certainly doesn't stop on the weekends. So when you need us the most, Arden Courts is there to help you. And so I'm very excited to, again, have Arden Courts Memory Care Community on board with us. And right now we're going to take a little commercial break, and then I'm going to be bringing on our very first guest speaker.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, and welcome back to CareGiverSolutions.info. Thank you for joining us today. Arden Courts is the big sponsor of this show, and one of the reasons that I love Arden Courts is because they are very into education for the caregiver. As a matter of fact, all of the Arden Courts in the country, and there are over 50 of them scattered around the United States, they all provide free educational seminars for caregivers. So caregivers can go and learn, and actually, if you don't have someplace for your spouse, if you're caring for a spouse or your loved one, the Arden Courts will provide free respite care on site while you attend the seminar. You just need to ask about that service when you RSVP to many of the caregiving seminars that we have. So if you're interested in seminars in your area, again, feel free to call our 800 number, and I call her 800 Janet during the day, and she'll be happy to give you an update of any Arden Courts near you that you could actually go and attend the seminars. Now, in addition to that, we have lots and lots of information that we can share with you. And one of the things that we want to provide to you, Arden Courts is actually supplying this 36-hour day book. Now, if you've never read this book and you are a family caregiver, you really, really want to get a hold of one of these, get a copy of it, and we're providing a copy free to you just for calling the Arden Court 800 number. And all you have to do is give us your name and your phone number and your address, and we'll be happy to mail this out to you. This is the 36-hour day, written by Dr. Peter Rabins. Caregivers call this their caregiving Bible. And this book is chock full of everything that you'll need to know. It has chapters on dealing with everyday problems. It has chapters on medical problems, problems of behavior, you and the impaired person as part of the family, getting outside help, all kinds of problems of mood. What happens when all of a sudden my loved one changes their mood? Basically, what is dementia? It's going to be start at the basics and explain what dementia is. It's going to explain also what the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's is, which we will be talking about on this show. It's going to be talking about all kinds of things that you can do, and it will describe the characteristics of somebody as they go through the process of Alzheimer's disease. So this is an invaluable tool, and so please call Arden Courts 800 number, and again, I will give that to you, 888 478-2410 and ask for your free copy of Dr. Peter Rabin's The 36-Hour Day. But you must tell them that you heard about it on caregiversolutions.info. All right? Very good. So thank you so much. Well, I'm very excited today to have my very first guest with us. I want you to meet him and listen to his story. So please welcome Dr. Donald Snyder.
Marcia, pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for joining me today here. I'm very excited that you have come down and share with us today.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm very excited to be here with you.
Well, great. Now, you've given me a copy of your resume and your bio, and I'm very, very impressed with everything. You are a medical doctor, and you specialize in internal medicine and nephrology.
Right. Nephrology is a study of kidney disease.
I was just going to ask you that. Okay. So now, as a medical doctor, you've recently retired. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Right here in beautiful South Florida in Boca Raton.
That's quite right.
Okay. And you had a great practice. From your resume, from everything that I see that you have been involved in, which is very, very extensive, I imagine that you've had a very fulfilling, satisfying career.
Well, I certainly did. And I was more than prepared for retirement. And then all of a sudden, I was faced with the problem of becoming a caregiver for a loved one.
No, wait a minute. When you had your practice and you were dealing with your patients over all of these years, didn't you deal with caregivers? Didn't they have problems, and did they not tell you about their problems? And did you come across that in your practice?
That's really a very interesting question. When you look back at medical training, and I graduated medical school in 1961. That's a long time ago. And then went on to postgraduate work and took training at Harvard and a number of other medical centers. Not once was caregiving raised as an issue or raised as a subspecialty.
Really?
Not once.
Not once. I wonder if they even had the term caregiver back then.
I don't think they did, frankly, because not because it didn't exist. Caregivers have existed for a long, long time.
That's right. Mostly people took care of their own in the family.
That's correct.
And they because they took care of their own, I doubt very much that a lot of them even thought about asking for outside help.
And that's what happened really to me and got me involved in caregiving and why I'm here tonight, actually.
Wonderful, because you're going to be telling your story, but I wanted to let the audience know, where your background was, that you have had so much experience with all your patients and all of their problems, but you must have felt, since you never were really trained in school for caring for the caregiver, you must have felt a little, I don't know, what would be the word? Maybe a little bit unprepared?
Insecure.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, that's the way I felt, and that's exactly what happened. And so I went out to try to get some help because I was having personal difficulties as a caregiver.
So once you retired, you became a family caregiver. So you have a very interesting story that I understand of an aha moment. Can you tell me about that?
Well, two things happened. One is that I went with my loved one to see a physician on multiple occasions and recognized that I was having a considerable amount of personal difficulties with caregiving.
You yourself?
Myself.
Like what kind of problems?
Well, emotional problems. I was having problems with depression and anger, and I was upset and ambivalent about my feelings about the chronic illness that my loved one had. And I was having difficulty, despite all my medical training, I was having a considerable amount of difficulty dealing with it personally.
So that little adage they say, physician, heal thyself, you were not able to.
Well, that's exactly correct.
In that respect, the more emotional problems. I mean, physically, yes, you'd know what to do if you got down, you had a cold, of course you know how to take care of that. But you're experiencing different kind of problems as a caregiver that brought these things onto you that weren't normal, at least for you.
And that's the background of why I set out to try to learn what I could about caregiving and train myself and read the books that I could and try to understand the issues that caregiving deals with, because caregiving and the health of the caregiver is very, very important to the care recipient. Very important.
That's right. So you educated yourself and you went to the doctor with your loved one, and what happened?
Well, I had two episodes that occurred that were kind of interesting. One was that the physician never asked me, Dr. Snyder or Don, how are you doing? What's happening with you?
So the doctor would talk to your loved one and ask your loved one lots of questions. How are you feeling? What's going on? And you're there and you're part of that piece of that puzzle, but you were never actually addressed.
You're quite right. And that was really understandable when I stopped to analyze it, because the problems of the chronic illness are so complex and so difficult to deal with that there's really very little room for physicians who are not trained in caregiving to actually concern themselves with the health and welfare of the caregiver, even though that's important for their patient, the recipient.
So why do you think, looking back, hindsight's 20/20, looking back, why do you might think that doctor didn't ask you how you were feeling?
Well, mostly because he didn't recognize the importance of the health of the caregiver in terms of relationship to the health of his patient, the recipient of the caregiving.
And maybe he didn't ask because he knew he couldn't help you, or he didn't know how to help you.
I think that was part of the problem. When I approached a psychologist for help with these issues, and I finally said to him, I need some help with coping. And unfortunately, he didn't offer any assistance at all.
But this is a psychologist.
Yes, is a well-trained and very experienced and very knowledgeable psychologist, but the problem of coping for caregivers is a completely separate issue and a completely separate field.
But what did he say? When you said, I need help with coping, what did he say?
He admitted to me that he didn't have the information I needed.
He actually did, right off the bat? Or did
No, it took a little bit of prying to get that information out of him. But basically, he admitted finally, he said, look, Dr. Snyder, I'd love to try to help you, but I frankly don't know how to help you with coping.
Wow.
And coping is a major issue for caregivers and has to be learned in all of its manifestations. And that's a separate field altogether. And that's why I set out to try to study the problem and try to learn what needs to be done to help the caregiver.
Well, kudos to you, because, I thought about it while you were talking of why maybe that primary care physician or the psychologist, but especially the primary care, now think about this, okay, because I think this might happen a lot to people out there when they go to the doctor. Think about this. Caregiving is a whole nother set of problems, right?
Yes.
Separate but yet connected to the patient. And the doctor is taking care of the patient, but the doctor not only doesn't really know how to help the caregiver, but he probably doesn't have the time, because doctors' offices, at least here in Florida, they're very, very busy. Their waiting times are extraordinary, sitting in the waiting room. They want to spend 10 minutes with you. And a caregiver who has questions, who has problems, that want the whole picture, that want help with the whole situation, in order for a doctor, a primary care physician, to take the time to do that, they would have to spend a lot more time than they would allow. And then, of course, their reimbursements, from insurance or whatever would not probably cover that. And so now it's eating into a doctor's bottom line. I mean, I hate to be, truthful about it, but I think it's the truth. And I feel that, the system, not to blame the doctor, because he's trying his best. He's trying to get through all those patients as fast as he can, because, they're lined up in the waiting room, and not to blame him at all. But I don't think the system is set up in order to help the doctor help others. Do you agree?
Oh, I agree completely. And it's a very controversial area, because I think that's part of the major reason why caregiving therapy actually does not get adequate attention. And that is that there's no third-party payer that's willing to accept the caregiving therapy as a specific code for reimbursement for the physician.
for the physicians, I think you just touched on something, because I do know that therapy given to patients and given to caregivers is covered by clinical licensed social workers.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's correct. But not so much for physicians? And
that's correct.
Wow. Now look at why that might be.
Well, it's a very interesting area that requires a great deal of investigation, because there are some states, for example, California, that does offer support, financial support for employees, state employees who are become caregivers, and they actually support them. And there are actually programs throughout the country that do that on a limited basis. But major third-party payers like Medicare, like third-party insurance companies, at the moment do not reimburse physicians for care for caregivers.
Wow. And that, lends itself to a political discussion and a whole lot more than what we're going to get in here today about. But I want people to be aware of it, because it is a problem.
It's an area I hope we can get into at some time in the future, because I think we need public support for this kind of effort.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question. So you couldn't get help from the primary care, you couldn't get help from the psychologist, and you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with other things that probably are actually causing you physically to not be well. How did you help yourself?
Well, unfortunately, the doctors treat themselves too often, and the doctor that treats himself is often has a fool for a patient, and that's the kind of trap that I fell into, and that's why I set out to try to understand the problems of the caregiver and to train myself into the issues so that I could provide maybe some support for caregivers. And I'm hoping to develop a significant program for caregivers down the road.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that is a great endeavor, and I wish you well on that, and I certainly want to hear more about that when you get that up and running. And so we're going to be not only talking going forward with you about the problems with caregivers getting the information, but how best to give them that information. I know that you educated yourself, you read the book. I'm sure you read the 36-Hour Day by Dr. Peter Rabins. That's one of the first ones that actually came out. And so a lot of caregivers, unfortunately, don't have the luxury of sitting down on their sofa in their living room and reading books. It takes time. Right?
Absolutely.
It takes effort, it takes concentration, it takes focus, and of course it takes a lot of time, and caregivers don't have a lot of time.
There's just one thing I want to mention about books and sources. There's a wonderful book by Gail Sheehy.
Yes.
Right? Gail Sheehy in 2010 produced a book after she wrote Passages, which was on the New York Times list for 3 years, right? And this was called Passages in Caregiving.
Yes.
And it's available in all major libraries, and is a book that every caregiver should have on their shelf.
It's a great book, and I actually had the opportunity to meet Gail Sheehy not very long ago, a few years ago. She was here in South Florida, and she actually attended the Alzheimer's Community Care Educational Conference that's held in West Palm Beach, Florida every year. And so she had a book signing, and I got to talk with her a little bit, and it was very, very amazing, her story, because...
So there are sources. There are a great deal of sources, both in terms of agencies and in terms of organizations like Arden Courts, like Marcia, who are there to help.
Yes.
But it's very important that the caregiver try very hard to avail themselves, because it's a very, very difficult undertaking.
Well, I'm really glad that you're going to be taking that undertaking, because it's going to help caregivers to sort it out and get to the crux of the problem, because, you can read these books, but sometimes it's too overwhelming and they don't have the opportunity, but you're searching for just that one thing. And so a professional, such as the experts at Arden Courts, such as yourself as a doctor, you can pretty much weed through all of that gobbledygook and get to the crux of the problem in a matter of just minutes, as opposed to hours or days or weeks that a caregiver may not see, because obviously they're overwhelmed and they don't always see clearly.
No, they get very confused by all the emotions and by the ambivalence and by the concern they have about what they're doing and how they're feeling.
Right. And as you have seen probably in your own practice, caregivers not only get depressed like you did, but they also get caregiver burnout. They also have guilt. They also have fear. There's lots and lots of emotions that come with caregiving, and it's so much. And sometimes they're just toppled on top of each other, and they feel like just one more little thing is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
I think it's most important to leave one thought that's very important. That is, family caregiving is motivated by love.
Wow!
And if in fact that's the truth, then what we've got to do is we've got to understand that the caregiver has to take care of themselves in order to be able to take care of the recipient.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's what this is all about. This is why we have caregiversolutions.info. That's why Dr. Snyder is here. And we're going to be going to our next commercial break. And when we come back, Dr. Snyder will be sharing with us his tips on how to be a better caregiver and how to relieve a lot of that stress. So join us.
Right from the Heart assists families in finding the right living arrangements for their aging parents. Founded in 2012 by Sharon Agate, Senior Life Consultant. Sharon has counseled seniors and their families for over 20 years in clinical settings and in independent assisted living and memory care communities. Finding the right community can be overwhelming and time-consuming. Right from the Heart takes the stress and worry from you. Sharon will personally meet mom or dad and evaluate their needs and lifestyle preferences and develop a plan at no cost to you. She will accompany you to visit selected communities and guide you every step of the way so you can be assured you're making a well-informed decision. Call Sharon at 561-374-4696. Sharon's promise to you is in your knowing that her advice will always come right from the heart. Grab a pen because you're going to be given some really important information and a phone number to call that will really help you.
Did you know that the law allows people to protect assets and qualify for Medicaid? Did you know that Medicaid can pay for home care, assisted living, and nursing home care at even the best facilities and with even the best of agencies? Hi, I'm Scott Solkoff, and I write the book on Florida elder law. My father and I have authored the leading textbook on Florida elder law, now in its 14th edition. I lecture, I train, I teach other lawyers and judges all about the law, and I can teach you too. I love teaching and advising my elderly clients and their families. Good elder law planning can save the family nest egg and result in a tremendous difference in quality of care. Board-certified elder law attorneys, I'm board certified, are specialists in planning for incapacity, wills, and trusts, and protecting assets against the cost of long-term care. Come in and see me. I charge $250 for a 2-hour meeting, and I don't think I've ever had one person tell me it wasn't worth many times that amount. We don't do free meetings, which often are nothing more than a sales pitch from someone who really needs the business. Call me at 561-733-4242. I've been in business for over 20 years doing just this work, and am certified as a specialist by the Florida Bar. Set an appointment. That's 561-733-4242. Come see me in my Delray Beach office on Atlantic Avenue. You just have to call my office at 561-733-4242, and I'm Scott Solkoff. Let me help you protect your assets, qualify for Medicaid or VA benefits, have greater peace of mind knowing that it's been done, and a higher quality of life. So again, call me, Scott Solkoff, at 561-733-4242, and remember, call your parents, not just to tell them about Scott Solkoff, just to tell them that you love them and appreciate them. I'm going to call my parents now.
The hiring of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based on advertisements alone. You can call our office at 561-733-4242 to get more information about our qualifications and expertise. You are listening to your host, Marcia, Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, welcome back. Thank you for paying attention to those commercials, because I have personally, on a local level here in South Florida, worked with both Scott Solkoff and his awesome team and Sharon Agate from Right from the Heart. And I personally can tell you that they are the best at what they do. And so if you do need an elder law attorney and you're in the South Florida area, call Solkoff Legal, and they have a wonderful staff that are very knowledgeable. As a matter of fact, they are very passionate also about helping the caregiver, because they know what a caregiver needs. And when they had a client, they actually didn't hesitate to refer to Arden Courts, because they knew that Arden Courts could come to the rescue and help this family caregiver with the situation with their mom. And we actually made better quality of life for this gentleman's mother, thanks to Solkoff Legal referring to us. And so I want to thank them for that. Also, I want to say something about Sharon Agate with Right from the Heart. She is top notch. She's excellent at what she does. She has a passion for helping people, especially very knowledgeable in dementia care. And if you're looking for help in finding the right assisted living or looking at options for your loved one, even if they're in Palm Beach or Broward, she can take you to these places that you probably might not see everything or hear everything if you were not accompanied by a consultant, and she will help you and be there by your side, and it doesn't cost you a penny. And these are the kind of resources that we want to give you as a caregiver, because anything that you could learn and take advantage of to help you is going to help everyone to become a better caregiver and make your loved one be a little bit more comfortable in lots of different ways. So, that being said, welcome back. Thank you, Dr. Donald Snyder, for being our guest on the show today. And we're here talking with Dr. Snyder. He's a retired medical doctor and had a private practice here in Boca Raton, and recently has started on a new venture to educate caregivers and educate the rest of the medical community about the importance of being a caregiver that can take care of themselves and help them to do that. So we're going to be talking to Dr. Snyder now about what should a caregiver do to take care of themselves, because we always say, caregiver, take care of yourself first. We've talked about how they do need to reach out, but they don't know what to do and how to do it. So tell me some of the ways a caregiver can help themselves as far as making life a little bit better for themselves and in the long run for the person they take care of.
I'd love to talk about it for a few moments, but let me just give you a couple statistics that are very, very important. HHS, Health and Human Services, recently published a study in which they revealed that there are currently about 52 million unpaid family caregivers in this country.
And that's a lot.
And that 63% higher mortality rate amongst caregivers than compared to the same age group for non-caregivers. Therefore, both in terms of the economics of the problem and in terms of the medical aspects of the problem, we've got to do something about this very, very large issue.
And the baby boomers coming of age and coming along, and that's like what they call the tsunami is coming, the caregiving tsunami.
Right. If we just talk about Alzheimer's alone, the fact of the matter is they reported that there are at the present time, $214 billion costing this country for the care at this time for Alzheimer's. And in 2050, it's going to go up to $5.5 billion.
Unbelievable, but true.
That's incredible,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely incredible, and that means that we've got to do something about this problem from a governmental standpoint. We really need to address this issue. Obamacare hasn't even touched this problem.
And we're trying to find an answer to how to cure it, how to stop it. There's a lot of research going on out there to do it. But what are we doing in the meantime? I hear you, because there's a big push with the Alzheimer's Association and the research, and a lot of the doctors are out there looking for a cure, and scripts, and everybody that's the drug companies looking for the magic pill that's going to do this. But in the meantime,
in the interim, we've got to take care of the caregiver.
Exactly.
We must take care of the caregiver, because that's important to the patient.
That's exactly
to the care
right.
recipient.
That's right.
So what we're hoping to do is to create a program in the future, the near future, I hope, in which the caregiver will have a professional like myself to be able to meet with them personally and deal with them electronically by email and by website interaction.
So they don't have to schlep to a doctor's office and wait in a waiting room.
They have somebody that they can use as a source whenever they
Right.
need to.
Exactly.
And then we're going to provide them with a means of communication. We're going to provide them with a website and a portal so that they can talk to the professional anytime that they want to.
Wow. Anytime, day or night?
Anytime.
Wow. Amazing. That would be phenomenal.
Then we hope to take this group and introduce them into various forms of modalities that will help them deal with their daily problems, such as meditation, such as yoga, such as Tai Chi, and such as exercise. And we're going to teach them how to do these things so they can do them at home. And that will enable them to carry on these programs both at home and in group therapy. And when they're in group therapy, they'll be interacting with other caregivers, which is very, very important.
So they keep up that social network with other people
Yes,
that they can identify with,
They've
right?
got to understand that they're not alone.
Right.
That there's a lot of people out there trying to help them, and a lot of people who are suffering along with them. And we hope all of those results will come from this kind of interaction of group therapy. We're hoping to bring this to South Florida relatively soon.
Well, I can't wait. It sounds really exciting. But let's talk about, before that happens, and I hope it's sooner than later, what can a caregiver do now in their own home without having access to their private doctor website that they can do to kind of help them on a medical point of view, from your opinion?
Well, there are a number of things that they can do. I think one of the most important things is to understand how to reduce stress.
And how do we reduce stress?
I think we have to first of all understand that we have to understand how to take it apart and how to perceive what it is all about and how we respond to it and how to identify the sources of the stress so that we can avoid the issues. It's a very complex problem. It is not something we can deal with just briefly here, but that's one of the reasons why we're setting up the means of communication.
And you're not talking about just popping a pill to de-stress. That's not what you're talking about.
Not at all. I'm trying to educate people to understand the sources of the emotions, to understand what the emotions are telling them, what the signals are that precipitate the stress, and how to recognize that and maybe deal with it in a way that is more healthful both for them and their patient.
So can you give me an example of how to recognize what if I were feeling stressed, what would be a signal that I'm stressed that you could identify?
Oh, it's the kind of thing we deal with all the time. Everybody understands that when the heart rate is accelerated, when they start to perspire, when they start to feel jittery and jumpy, that these are manifestations of a tremendous increase in hormonal circulation that's occurring as a result of the cause of the stress and the stress itself.
Now, there's such a thing as good stress, though.
Of course.
But we're not talking about the good kind of stress. The good kind of stress is when you're excited and your heart might be pounding a little bit because you're excited because you're about to do something very daring or something that might be a little scary for you that you've never done before, like maybe public speaking or something like that. That's kind of what they call good stress because it's those like endorphins kicking in. And they always say if you're not a little bit like that, then you probably won't do as good a job because those things, I think, tend to help you both psychologically, but it is something that you can recognize in yourself. But we're talking about bad stress, right? And we're talking about the kind of stress that is consistent or
Talking
chronic
about the kind of
stress
that is detrimental to your health.
There you go.
That's what's important. And I agree completely with what you said. I think that's a wonderful analogy. There are emotions that are healthful. There are emotions that are positive, and there are emotions that are negative and detrimental to your health.
Exactly.
And you have to learn how to anticipate these things and how to deal with them. And one of the things I find that's very, very helpful is simply keeping a journal.
Really?
And making some lists and understanding what are the triggers. Make a list of them on paper. Write them down.
So that you can show a history of maybe some of the situations that trigger those.
So that you can understand them better.
For yourself. And understand yourself better.
Yes.
Because by understanding what triggers us, maybe then we can somehow prevent those things from happening to offset an event.
Yeah, and we can recognize the emotion and the signal it's sending, and we can take some action to prevent the subsequent detrimental effects.
Well, let me ask you, Dr. Snyder, how often should a caregiver be journaling? Because, they don't have a whole lot of time, and they don't have, a lot of time to sit down and write out every little thing.
I would take a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes out of the evening when the recipient is at rest.
Gone to bed.
Yes. And instead of sitting in front of the television and watching what's happening in the news, which is stressful all by itself.
Oh, it sure is.
But sit down for 10, 15 minutes and write down what happened today. What were the triggers? What was the reason for the trigger? And what did I learn from it? And how can I avoid it in the future? You have to educate yourself.
So they should write down what happened, but also how they felt about it. How did it make them feel?
Good.
Right?
Exactly right.
Did this make me feel angry? Did this make me feel sad? Did this make me feel guilty?
Good
right?
for you. That's exactly right.
And by knowing yourself and saying, this was the trigger that did this, how could I in the future prevent this from happening? And I think it would enlighten them, right?
Absolutely right.
Oh, I love that. That's a great idea. I love that idea. Anything else that they could do right now?
I think you've got to educate yourself into what you can do to relax yourself. If you can simply take 10 minutes and walk, or take 10 minutes and do some deep breathing exercises, or maybe from the programs that we are hoping to bring forward, you can learn a little bit of yoga, or you can learn...
I do yoga.
Do you?
Did you know that?
No.
And so you're supposed to say, well, how do you like it?
What I'm going to say is, from your response, I can see how you like it.
I do yoga, and my friend said, well, how do you like it? And I say, I don't. And they're very surprised. And they say, well, why do you do it? Because I've signed up class after class. I said, because I know it's good for me.
Yeah.
And I do it because I know it's good for me. And so sometimes I can relate that to a caregiver, because sometimes they have to do things that they don't want to do, but it's going to be good for them.
So exercise, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, they're all result in the final analysis in learning how to deal with stress.
I think that is so important, because the way you physically are is going to affect your whole psyche, your whole body.
And since you're motivated by love, you have to understand that your welfare is critical to the recipient's welfare.
I love that you said that it's motivated by love. I love that. You don't hear that, because, a lot of people feel like, oh, it's an obligation and I have to do this. But caregivers are motivated by love. Now, I know a few that aren't, but the majority are. And I think that's a wonderful thing to recognize in a caregiver, of where that's coming from. It's coming from their heart. And they want to do this. They want to be the best caregiver they can be.
And by the way, this is true of men and women.
Both.
Right?
Right.
You have to understand that it's true of men as well. In fact, there's a wonderful book that's entitled, Who Says Men Don't Care? Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
Well, that's a wonderful book, and I recommend it to everybody, because, in fact, men as caregivers get short shrift. No, I don't want to argue with you about that.
Well, I know lots of caregivers, and they always say that caregivers are dedicated, and there is an which ones are better, which ones are martyrs, which ones are easier to give up their load, and there's controversy about that. But I think overall, every caregiver is there for the right reason. So we're going to take our next commercial break, and we'll be back with Dr. Donald Snyder and talk about more ideas and tips for you as the caregiver to reduce that stress, and so that you can hopefully relax a little bit and bring a little bit of peace to your life.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. Right from the Heart assists families in finding the right living arrangements for their aging parents. Founded in 2012 by Sharon Agate, Senior Life Consultant. Sharon has counseled seniors and their families for over 20 years in clinical settings and in independent assisted living and memory care communities. Finding the right community can be overwhelming and time-consuming. Right from the Heart takes the stress and worry from you. Sharon will personally meet mom or dad and evaluate their needs and lifestyle preferences and develop a plan at no cost to you. She will accompany you to visit selected communities and guide you every step of the way so you can be assured you're making a well-informed decision. Call Sharon at 561-374-4696. Sharon's promise to you is in your knowing that her advice will always come right from the heart. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And welcome back to CareGiverSolutions.info. We've been talking to Dr. Donald Snyder. He's here in the studio with us today, retired physician from Boca Raton, Florida, who has a passion and a mission. And so thank you again, Dr. Snyder, for being with us. We want to talk a little bit before our time is up today about something that I know is very important to not only you, but something that you want to share to our caregivers. And that's about how does a caregiver interface with their family physician or any physician? Do you have any special tips on that?
I do. After a long experience with patients in the office, I think it's extremely important that the caregiver learn how to talk to their doctor.
Well, don't they just talk?
I think the most important thing is to verbalize, is to interact with the doctor, and to make certain that you prepare yourself by making a list of questions before you go in to see the doctor, so that you don't forget to raise an issue with the doctor. But just as important is to write down what it is the doctor says to you, to take some notes. And if you're having trouble doing these things, get somebody to go with you to the doctor's office, either a loved one or a friend or a relative. Ask them to come with you and for them to sit in the background and listen to the doctor, so that when you leave, somebody will remember what the doctor said.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I just thought about this. What if you don't have someone can go with you? When you don't have a friend or a neighbor or a relative, how would doctors feel about you taking a little tape recorder and recording what they said? Do you think?
I think any way in which you can record what the doctor tells you.
And that would be okay, do you think?
Whether you write notes or you do a video of the doctor, I think most doctors would receive it positively.
Okay. Well, I never thought about that before, but
Especially if the patient actually says, the reason I'm doing this is I want to make certain I understand exactly what you're telling me.
Right.
I don't forget it.
Right. And I don't want to get it wrong, and I don't want to
Right.
missay it. I want to be able to, listen to it maybe over and over again, because, caregivers sometimes they don't hear everything the same way as we do, because they've got so much going on in their heads.
Not just caregivers, any patient
Well,
that
that's
sits down in front of a doctor.
That's true. So that's another idea. That's a tip right there. You can write it down, what you want to say, and write down what the doctor says to you. And if you can't write it down, or you have too much to write down, then take a little tape recorder, but ask permission first.
Yes,
Let them know
wonderful idea.
that I'd like to do this for me, to help me to understand what you're telling me, so I don't get it wrong, and I can share maybe that with my children up north, because you don't want the telephone thing. You get on the phone with your loved ones up north and you tell them the story, and then they call their sister or their brother and they tell them the story, and then it goes round robin, and before you get back, it's all different.
It's changed.
It's changed. It's a different story. So you don't want to do that. So I think that is very good advice. Take that little tape recorder and tape it, and
That's
then
a wonderful idea.
Yeah, I thought so.
But I agree, you need permission to do it.
You do. And so that's a wonderful thing to do. Any last comments, questions that we want to discuss that maybe some of your patients have had problems with?
I think the only thing I want to leave with everybody is to understand that the doctors are not trained to take care of caregivers, and you have to be aggressive. You have to say, I need help. Please help me. I want to take care of my loved one, but I am having trouble and I need help. Be forthright. Be aggressive. Talk to the doctor. He'll understand. Doctors are wonderful, wonderful people that have in their hearts the desire to help their patients.
And if they don't have that desire, and they don't want to help you, and they don't take the time, then guess what?
You've got to change doctors.
Find another doctor. Yes. And there's plenty of doctors out there, and one doctor doesn't fit all. You really have to find one, in my opinion, that you can really relate to, that understands your problems, that's compassionate, and somebody that's going to take an interest in your well-being. And if they don't, and it's not the right fit, just like I tell caregivers all the time, you have a private duty in your home, taking care of your loved one, to help out with some activities of daily living, with bathing and dressing and things like that. But guess what? If it's not a fit, if it's not a personality fit, and they're not the right person for the job, you just pick up the phone and call the agency and said, send somebody else. And you keep doing that and doing that. So I think the same thing with the doctor. You want to find one and stick with it, something that works. And because the doctor is going to be, if it's the right fit, they're going to be there thick and thin, right?
Absolutely
somebody
right.
that you're going to count on, that's going to be there to help you through thick and thin. Well, I can't thank you enough, Dr. Snyder, for being with us here today, Dr. Donald Snyder. We're looking forward to your next endeavors and what you have coming down the line, and I certainly want you to keep us abreast of that, and maybe we'll be able to help caregivers a little further with all the things that you're doing.
Thank you, Marcia.
Well, thank you. Very, very much appreciated. I also want to remind everybody about the free 36-hour day book that Arden Courts is providing to you. All you have to do is call the 800 number for Arden Courts. Tell them that you saw caregiversolutions.info. Tell them that you'd like a copy of this free book. It's the Caregiver Bible. If you've never read it, it's a wonderful source for you. Gives you a great explanation. It's just one resource that Arden Courts can provide to you. Call us on our 800 number. Tell us that you have a problem. We'll connect you to the right people. We know lots of wonderful doctors in the United States that work with all of our Arden Courts, and we're going to be able to point you in the right direction. And so I want to thank our sponsors today, not only Arden Courts. I want to thank Right from the Heart. And I'd also like to thank Solkoff Legal for all of their support to bringing this wonderful educational tool to you, the caregiver. And I hope you join us next Tuesday from 5 to 6 at caregiversolutions.info, where we're going to have lots more exciting information for you. And check us out. Until next time, give yourself a hug. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions. The opinions expressed